Morning, everyone, and welcome to day 2 of the Connection Conference. We're so excited to have Claudia Howard from Google joining us for our first session of the day. Before we jump into that, I did want to cover a few housekeeping items, as always. One is the session is getting recorded, so this will be made available to all attendees afterwards, probably at some point next week, so you can stay tuned for that. All attendees are on mute and off camera, so just to be aware of that, but know that there is the chat function should you want to chime in and participate in the conversation at all within the chat area. But if you do have any questions for Claudia throughout the presentation that you would hope that we could spend a little bit of time doing some Q&A at the end of the session, there is the Q&A function that we'd ask you to use. So go ahead and enter in any questions there, and then time permitting, we'll get to those that we can as well. So if you do need any help, you can use actually either the chat or the Q&A function as well. If you're experiencing any issues or need anything, we'll be monitoring that and trying to help out how we can. But you can also email marketing@carnegiehighered.com with anything that you might need now or throughout the remainder of the conference as well. And finally, we do encourage you to participate on social as well. So sharing any of your thoughts or insights that you're seeing from the presentations that you're experiencing with the conference. So please tag or use the hashtag #TheConnection and tag us at Carnegie HQ as well. So with that, we are once again very excited to have Claudia Howard from Google. She is the head of industry education at Google, and this is kicking off day 2 for us. Carnegie is premier partners with Google and works very closely with them on a lot of the work that we do for our university partners on the marketing front. So we're really excited for a lot of the data and information that Claudia will be sharing with us and our audiences today. So with that, I will kick it over to you, Claudia. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much. Excuse me. Thank you so much, Mark. And with that, we will get started. So hello and good morning. My name is Claudia Howard, and I'm currently head of industry here at Google, leading our Washington, D.C. based education team. And I want to first thank the Carnegie team for having me here today. And I want to thank all of you for logging on first thing this morning. So I spent the majority of my career in marketing, branding, and insights, and I'm fortunate now to be able to use those experiences in the education space. One of the best parts of my job, and one that I truly enjoy, is being able to leverage research and insights to identify trends to actually help our educational partners reach students throughout their education journey. I truly believe in the power of education and its ability to unlock opportunity and change lives. So I really want to thank each and every one of you for being here and playing a part in opening doors for so many. With that, let's get started. So we have 2 parts to our agenda today. We'll start with the why, and we'll look at some of the research that we've done on student perspectives on the lifetime value of education. Then we'll look at some of the trends that we're seeing in student sentiment and the value of certain programs over others and how that's actually playing out in search query growth. At Google, we look at search queries as a great measure of intent. And so we like to see how those actually map to some of the clinical research that we do. And finally, to Mark's point, I'll leave time for questions at the end. So please be sure to use the Q&A function or write in the chat if you have any questions or notes along the way. So I think everybody's probably aware, but at Google, we do a lot of research and work with a lot of data. Today, we're going to share a bit about what we're seeing in this data across both student sentiment and search query trends. And this will allow us to better understand what students are saying, and then we can actually see what they're doing and how they're searching. Again, a great measure of intent. But before we jump in, I want to share a headline that a colleague of mine saw just a few months ago. It caught our attention. It was kind of going around our team. And I personally felt that the framing was quite interesting. The headline reading, "What's the ROI of your alma mater?" Honestly, it was a little jarring to see the ROI because to me, it actually felt a bit transactional, right? And I don't think that many people would think about their time in higher ed as just, a transaction, a one-on-one transaction. So our team took a step back and questioned, is that just a catchy headline? Or is there really something there? Is there more there? Are students really looking at their education as an investment in ways that we would traditionally think of investments? And so our team dug into this a little bit and looked at a number of different studies. And there's even actually a recently released dashboard from the Center on Education and the Workforce at Georgetown University that looks specifically at the ROI of colleges 10, 20, and even 40 years out. And so that brings me back to the concept of ROI and lifetime value of education. And I'm sure a lot of you have been hearing about this for a while. And just like you look at the lifetime value of students to your institutions, we're now seeing that students are looking at the lifetime value that education provides to them and how they can actually enhance that value throughout their journey. I think if we pause for a second, we realize that students are no different from any of us over the last 2 years. They've experienced a lot of uncertainty throughout the pandemic. But one thing that has been constant is that they have had a choice as it pertained to educational pathways. So as the pandemic becomes more endemic and we start to return to a sense of normalcy, that focus on choice will only increase. And we're seeing that in our research. We're seeing that students are hyper-focused on getting the most value out of their education investment. So what's the ROI of your alma mater? It is a catchy headline, but it also is showing up in our research. And again, that's because students are actually putting education in a similar set of other things where they make large financial investments. They're looking at it through the lens of major life milestones, whether it's buying a car, taking a vacation, buying a home. Students are making a lot of investments each year. So why wouldn't education be in that consideration set? These are the types of things that you're competing with. And so, yes, all of these investments are important, but what you should know is that 79% of students say that their degree, short course, or boot camp will be the most important financial expenditure that they will make this year. Let that sink in for just a second. That means that 4 out of 5 students rank education as their most important financial investment this year. So to provide a little bit of context on that, this stat is actually from research that our team ran at the beginning of April. And we've been conducting quarterly student sentiment surveys for the past year and plan to do so for the foreseeable future. So for this first wave in 2022, we wanted to really hone in on student perspectives on the lifetime value of education and where they are finding the most value. So here's what we found. We're seeing that the value of a degree is still substantial. We know that core degree programs are the anchor of colleges and universities. Higher ed is built on amassing credit hours that build to a degree. And so the fact is that students are seeing value in those degrees. The weight of the degree programs is actually huge. 71% of students strongly agree that a bachelor's degree is essential to advancing their careers, while 68% believe that a college degree is as or more important than it has been in previous generations. So again, if you think back to the headline about the ROI in your alma mater, the institution where you're earning the degree, it actually makes sense that we're seeing numbers like this. And if we dig deeper on where they're seeing degrees that offer value, we see a lot of it has to do with their careers. 2 in 5 prospective undergraduate students believe that their degree will change their career trajectory. And 67% agree that a postgraduate degree is essential to their professional development. Overall, The majority of students agree in the inherent societal and economic value attached to achieving a higher degree. It's not just that a degree is needed, it's that it will transform their career trajectory. And so this is great news, but we're also seeing that there's a challenge ahead, and I'm sure many of you are experiencing some of this. And that challenge is that although students see the value of a college degree, we know that the number of students who plan to enroll in such programs is trending downward. And on the flip side, we're seeing that more students are planning to enroll in non-degree options. And so I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about short courses, because that's actually where we're seeing a ton of growth. And so let's start a little bit with their mindset. Non-degree students, they're highly motivated. Education ranks very high amongst their life priorities. And when we ask students where pursuing an education ranks within their current life priorities, we observed education ranked significantly higher among prospective non-degree students versus prospective degree students at 74% to 64%. So a 10-point difference. That's pretty substantial. And when we look at where students are seeing value in short courses, we see that the reasons are anchored again in career trajectory. Whether it's entering into a new industry, getting a promotion, a raise, a pay increase, students are hyper-focused on outcomes. Again, it goes back to a return on investment and making sure that they see the value. So I see one question that just popped up that I'll pause and answer around how non-degree is defined. The way that we define non-degree is short course, boot camp, certificate programs, not entering into higher ed, attaining credit hours to get to a degree, conferring a degree. So coming back, talk a little bit about the optimism for short courses. The fact is that we see actually optimism is super high in non-degree students. They tend to be more optimistic than degree students when it comes to attaining education, and it's tied to their career trajectory, particularly when we look at it from the perspective of upskilling or reskilling. Again, you see about a 7-point difference on the upskilling side and an 11-point on the reskilling side. And so you might be thinking, so what? What does this all mean? And why am I talking so much about non-degree students? Honestly, it's because higher education institutions are their top choice for providers of these programs. When we asked which providers they're considering, 56% of prospective non-degree students are considering a university program, almost double the second option on the consideration list. And that's up 13 points year over year. So they're increasingly looking at higher education institutions to provide continued value throughout their lives. Because again, if you go back to the headline in the ROI of my alma mater, if they see value, they will come back. And if they come back, the lifetime value for you all also increases. And so these short course students, they're also more likely to enroll in a program with the same provider again. When we asked, what is the likelihood of them enrolling in a program with the same provider again, 68% of students said that they would enroll again with the same provider. So a pretty hefty majority. So knowing that these students are likely to enroll, what would be the best way to engage them? One thing that we observed in our research is that the majority of students will return with a 15% discount. And when we asked open-ended, what's the average percentage discount that you desire? The number was 35%. So if you do decide to provide discounts, you could consider a range between 15 and 35%. And we traditionally think of non-degree students as having a lower lifetime value for the institution. So the concept of factoring in discounts would obviously further impact that lifetime value, but we also see that non-degree students have the potential for continued value, as we know they're willing to come back to providers, particularly when they've been pleased with the results. So I'm gonna pause for a minute, because oftentimes I think we're having these conversations about what we're trying to promote, degree first programs versus non-degree programs, and they actually don't have to be mutually exclusive because students don't see them as mutually exclusive. We talked about how higher ed is anchored on a model of conferring degrees, but more and more we are seeing credential stacking take place. And while it's not the main pathway, we're even starting to see students begin their journey with certificates. So obviously, we still know the vast majority of students matriculate through a four-year university, but the number of students starting on the certificate, short course, or boot camp side, and then getting a degree is actually increasing. So we're thinking about non-degree students. For some, their initial investment might be smaller and over a shorter period of time than a degree student. But if you consider that the non-degree student is 40% more likely to enroll in a degree program, then you can see the value of engaging with that segment and measuring their overall impact to the bottom line. And so up to this point, we've been going over what students have been saying as part of our research. But we also want to supplement this research with some of what we're seeing from a search perspective. As I mentioned previously, we see search as a proxy for consumer intent. This allows us to see what is top of mind for students, identify where there's pressures in the market and where their opportunities currently are or could be in the future. So our team partnered with one of our analytical leads, and they are experts on search trends across industries. And we are fortunate enough on our team to have a team of leads who work solely on education searches. So they were able to take a deep dive into not only the prospective students are saying, but what they're asking. And what they're asking validates many of the things that we've learned throughout the research. So what you're looking at here is the percent of total degree-related searches broken out by traditional versus non-traditional pathways for the first quarter of 2020 and 2022. Now, we know that a lot has happened over this time period, obviously, but we wanted to make sure that we had a baseline on a pre-COVID comparison to, the current circumstances. And the question we really wanted to ask here is, was there a material change in preferences between 2020 and 2022? In short, the answer is yes. Potential students are searching for non-traditional pathways more than ever. As of this year, non-traditional pathways now constitutes 52% of all degree searches, which is approximately 40 million a quarter within the education space. Now, this in no way undermines the importance of prospective students searching for their bachelor's program in psychology or a working mother who's looking to advance her career through online master's degrees. But what it does indicate is that the labor market has gotten tighter and people are looking for quicker wins in order to advance their careers and their education. So again, what do we mean by traditional versus non-traditional pathways? Traditional degreed pathways are your associates, your bachelor's, your PhD pathways, while non-traditionals focus on certifications, or short courses. And again, we wanted to use a 2-year CAGR for the trailing 6 months in order to provide a realistic view on growth rates, given that there was a lot of noise that we incurred as a result of COVID. So on the whole, we see that certificate query growth has been the true winner over the past 6 months, growing at a compound annual growth rate of 7% versus 2% for associates and bachelors, and 1% for degree and PhD searches. And that's because, as I mentioned earlier, prospective students are thinking about education in terms of ROI. And we see this in the questions that they're actually asking. Education ROI related searches are projected to grow by 23% this year in 2022. That is huge. As a benchmark, education overall searches are projected to grow by about 5% over that same time period. So this 23% growth rate far outpaces the industry average. So it's clear to us that students are not just looking for a new career path or ways to kind of top off their skill set, or even to kind of feel more comfortable amongst their peers, but they're asking what is going to give them the biggest bang for their buck. And we're seeing this in the area of studies that they're searching for as well. So to quickly explain the chart that you're looking at, on the vertical axis, we have year-over-year search growth. And on the horizontal axis, we have median earnings 2 years after graduation, grouped by area of study. And what we observed is that as expected earnings by area of study went up, interest in that subject matter also went up. And that makes sense. Students are looking for certificates or short courses that are going to bring them the biggest financial impact, not only in the questions that they're asking, but also in the subjects that they want to study. And so where do we go from here? The reality is that the student journey and their value to you is more complicated now than it has ever been. And it's not a one-size-fits-all type of approach or solution. Students have different needs, different values, and different goals, more so than ever before, driven by so much choice in the system. But what's next? When we talk about a move forward plan, based on what we're seeing in terms of student sentiment and intent, I'll leave you with 2 thoughts. First, consider including these types of non-degree programs in your offerings. We've said this before and we'll continue to say it. Short courses, certifications, and boot camps are here to stay. And you all should play in that space too. A lot of you are already doing this and you're building for it. Granted, this is a much longer play, but it's something that can set you up for success and the ability to serve these students based on their focus on growth, impact on career trajectory, and wanting to come to higher ed for these types of programs. The second thing is the second thing is something that you can do immediately. That's making sure that you're leading with the value in your messaging. Make sure you're considering what students think of value when it comes to their education and lead with that when engaging with them. Lastly, consider the promotions or discounts, because as we showed, students are more likely to enroll in another program when given a discount. But most importantly, focused on the outcomes as it relates to career trajectory. Because students are not only saying that this is important, but they're also validating that through their searches. With that, I want to kick it back to Mark to see if there are any questions that I can answer at this time.
Thank you so much, Claudia. And we did have a number of questions come through in the chat, so I'll try to get to a few of them. A few of them were, I believe, kind of in the same category, just for a bit of kind of clarification or detail around, especially on the search behavior, what audiences that was reflective of, right? So was it traditional or 18 to 22? Was it under 8? Did it involve under 18 audiences? All the above? If you could break that down a little bit.
So those audiences on the search are 18 plus in the market for higher education. So just general 18 plus, not under 18. but those in the market.
Okay, great, thank you. Someone else had asked, are students using the term ROI in searches, specifically that term ROI, and any trends you might be seeing there related to that?
We have seen that term pop up, which is how we were able to quantify that research around kind of the 23% increase. Yes, we are seeing ROI and return on investment in part of the search query.
And then again, a little bit more around just, what the makeup of some of the survey responders or search data was. Someone had asked, just curious to know the level of influence IT related short courses are playing in the survey results. I don't know if you'd have any background to provide there.
Yeah, so we have the ability to break that down at that level because we know, particularly being in the tech space, how important that is. So I think I would have to go back and be able to parse that out. We know that it's all encompassing, right? The numbers I presented are the higher level, but yes, we do have the ability to break that down and look at kind of how IT and technology focused degrees or short courses or boot camps are being searched. But I will say, generally speaking, they have trended to increase just as that's become a bigger part, right, of kind of our society.
Great. That's what I'm seeing in the Q&A so far. I know there was some discussion in the chat function, so just wanting to make sure we were able to capture as much as I can here with a bit of the time remaining. One just popped in. How have these trends compared with Google's own offerings, such as Grasshopper?
I honestly am not aware. I don't have a great answer for that question, so I apologize.
Sure. You mentioned non-degree programs for students. Does your research show an interest in such programs? It seems students would be attending college without gaining a credential of sorts. Would that seem meaningless?
So that kind of goes back to the credential stacking. What we're starting to see is that students, while either they're in kind of a higher ed setting, will also start to get a credential, right? Whether it's Google or a myriad of other places that offer kind of industry sector related credentials. So they're graduating with a degree and some level of a credential, right? We're seeing it either they start there, they get it while they're in higher ed or immediately following as part of their upskilling and reskilling now as a professional. So we're starting to see these things work more hand in hand than how traditionally they were very different pathways. They're starting to integrate much more closely. And I think obviously the COVID and the pandemic only accelerated that.
Okay, great. And then one that just popped in as well. Can you provide any insight on the 48% of searches that are for more traditional degree programs?
Yeah, I think that tends to be kind of what you would think it is, right? Just deeper dives into what programs, if I'm looking at nursing, if I'm looking at public health, business, what programs are available to me, right? Again, traditional coming out of high school, going into higher ed. We are seeing a little bit of a gap probably from an age standpoint, again, based on COVID, people starting a little later, taking a year off. But I think that kind of 48 of traditional degree tends to be what you would think it is. It's around cost, distance, what type of programs are available.
Great. Well, I know there was, as I mentioned, some conversation happening in the chat. I don't know if we picked up all of the questions that were getting asked in there, and we had a few that were, posted in the Q&A function, which I believe we had gotten to. One of the other things that I would mention just for the audience is that we will be just grabbing a copy of some of the conversation that was happening in the chat as well. And if there's anything that we missed, we will look to put that together and get any answers that we can or more detail that we can put together and perhaps develop that into some form of content that we can share out afterwards as a bit of a value add and additional piece of content for attendees as well. I don't know if I'm going a little bit on the fly here, but one that did just pop in as I see is, do you know who our parents search for their high school kids versus high school students searching? I don't know if you are able to dig in at that that granularity.
So there's not a direct identifier, but what I will say is that you can start to tell with the trends, right? Whether it's a professional looking to upskill or reskill, or someone following the traditional pathway. And so I think in some respects, it's not dissimilar if it's a parent searching for a high school kid or the high school kid searching for themselves, the type of search that would occur. I think the way that we look at this in information set is really around kind of like sentiment to drive higher ed decision making. And on the whole, the trends that we are seeing are that short courses and boot camp and certs are now moving into kind of the mainstream as a part of a more traditional pathway, right? It's not something that's so far out. And so I think the research does reflect that and the need to understand how that can fit into the overall higher ed ecosystem, right?
Perfect. And as they come in, I hope you don't mind, I'll continue to throw a few
Yeah,
more
no,
questions at
absolutely.
you.
I know
We've
we
got
have
a
the
bit of
time, we
time.
have 2 more minutes, so
Yeah. Do trends include these non-degree programs at community colleges or more Google or LinkedIn type certifications?
I'm not 100% sure on the specifics of that, right?
Okay.
I don't have a great answer for that. My gut would say yes, because some of the non-traditional programs that are offered at community colleges fall within a short course and cert and boot camp. And so based on how people actually search, they search at the higher level first, right? And then it starts to funnel down. So you're going to look for a short camp, a short a short course or a boot camp. You tend to kind of start broad and then you start to narrow down based on a number of factors in your search. So I'm inclined to say it does, but I'm not 100% sure. I will do in the follow-up, Mark, and get an answer on
Great.
that one.
Yeah, and that's what I mean, this was measuring kind of the keyword search activity around some of those types of programs and offerings. So versus more the specificity of that. Okay, great. Well, Claudia, as we mentioned, we'll dig through some of the chat conversation that was happening. If there's other things that we can put together and work together to provide some more detail and clarity and answers on that that were asked there. It was a great conversation that I saw occurring there, along with obviously so much of the great information that you were sharing as well. I believe I saw someone ask about just, will there be access to this information and this presentation afterwards? We are recording this, and so we will be sharing that out with all attendees as well as links to view the recordings afterwards. So the following, probably at some point next week. So Clyde, I don't know if you could quickly jump to the next screen just as we jump to some kind of closing housekeeping items. But once again, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to Google for being a part of our Connection Conference this week. We're really appreciative of you being a part of this and the information that you've shared and the time that you've provided to us all. So thank you again, Claudia, for that.
Absolutely. Thank you all so much for having me. And like I said, thank you all for being on the front lines and all the work that you do in education. I'm fortunate that I get to do it for a living, but it's also a passion of mine. So very appreciative to the Carnegie team and all of you here today.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. And for the remainder of the day and for the conference, so this is the first session of a stack day. So we've got 6 more sessions happening throughout the day. You can see the email address that you can go to. You can send any asks or questions or help that you might need to. I'll post right now for anyone that would need it or be helpful for a link to the schedule and hub page in the chat function. You should all have links to that in some of the email communication that we had as well. But you can get obviously the Zoom links and calendar ads for any of the sessions that you'd like to attend for that there. So we do thank you so much for attending. The next session is starting at 11 o'clock Eastern time and is presented by our own Jamie Alexic from Carnegie and its higher education digital marketing trends for 2022 and beyond. So sure to be a great session. So once again, thank you all for joining, and we look forward to seeing you at more of the sessions throughout the week. Thanks again, Claudia.